love comments, love conversations, and we're going to continue them today about apps and building a second brain, PKM stuff in general. So if you're unfamiliar with the space, a bit of a rundown. PKM, personal knowledge management, is basically note-taking. Building a second brain is a course and a philosophy of note-taking. And all of the apps are word processors where you write stuff on
We're going
tech
in hot
devices.
today.
When I explain this sort of stuff to my parents, that's what I say. Like, what's Obsidian? It's like Microsoft Word. It's a text editor. Okay, they understand that. If I was to say, oh, it's a network thought bidirectional link, no, they have no idea what any of that means.
This kind of coincides. We're going to take a tangent straight away in the first 5 seconds of the episode. So yesterday, I help out my local games store, and I was trying to explain board games in a very short space in time. And I had a conversation with one of the owners that evening of like, it's so hard to try and explain it. You either have to make them sit down and play it for like an hour, or you're able to explain it in a short space of time and get people's attention. And it's like, he was explaining when he went to the gaming expo for board games and stuff that they hated having to sit down and play a game for 45 minutes to understand it. It's just like, tell me what the game is, how well it is, what it does, and then I'll go buy it and play it at home. And one of the things that I was doing, because I was in the local library, sharing and how to play games, of different board games, which I loved. And it was really hard when I first started. I was like, okay, cool. How do I explain this game, which is an engine builder? For people who don't know what an engine builder is, it's literally you have to build up these pieces that you put together, and it basically means you win. Put incredibly simply, with no nuance whatsoever. And so having to explain that in like this short amount of time to like kids who don't want to be, they're there to play and do things, not like listen to someone drivel on. And so it's really interesting to be able to kind of boil it down as someone who knows the game, plays the game, is tiny bit strategic about playing the game. It was interesting to like have to come at it from a different context instead of like, here's this really cool game that you can do all these things in, and this is it. And it was focusing on the little character and the little this and the little that. Like, you get to do this, you get to do that. And then you go the other end of the scale when you had Lorcana, which is a card game that's just recently come out, which is Disney, where it's like the best way to explain it is to play it. But I spent the next 45 minutes teaching a game of Lorcana to 2 people. Now, they had already played things like Pokemon, which they enjoyed, but it was quite interesting to like the 2 sides. You had board game people who just want to know how to play it and then go out and play it, and then people who like card games who want to get into it and actually have to play the game to understand it.
I would challenge the have to play the game to understand it, but I think this is where it comes, for me anyway, when explanations down to what sort of knowledge the person is looking for, whether it's knowledge about or knowledge of, using ecological terms here. Because you can explain something and someone can regurgitate the explanation to you, or they may be able to grasp some level of understanding and the relations they have with the information you've shared, i.e., oh, that game is like this one that I've played, or I've played something like that before over there, or whatever. But they don't experience the game until they actually play the game, which is knowledge of rather than knowledge about.
Yeah.
And some games are easier to experience through actual experience because of the amount of complexity. And that's when you look at explanations and understanding. If you're explaining an extremely complex, i.e. there are lots of moving parts, if you explain a complex game or a complex thing to someone, then sometimes the simplicity of the explanation doesn't give enough information for the person to use. And for PKM, knowledge management, insert all the other jargon that we're probably going to explode today, a lot of that complexity is unnecessary because it's literally just note-taking on devices, like technology devices, most of the time, but it could be done analog. So you reduce all the complexity back, you pull back all the, what I would class inside of ecological processes, the properties that you need, the relational properties that you're looking for. Well, now, I mean, I'm going to dive well into the weeds for a second. Gibson in visual perception suggests we're not looking for distance, height, depth. We're not looking for those things. We just want to know, if you see a field or you see an open field, you're not looking at, okay, what is the length of this field? What's the up, down, left, right movements of the field, the textures of the field? No, I don't care about those properties. Can I walk from here to there? Yes or no? Is it walkable? Relational properties, the property of the environment and me, can I do the thing? And that's the affordance. And the affordance for PKM is, can I use the thing to do whatever it is you want to do? Can I research on the thing? Can I write on the thing? And at the end of the day, if you can't do those basic things, it's a crap tool.
For you.
Yeah, for the affordance that you're looking for.
Yes,
But I would argue, if you've got a PKM tool that has lots of features that hit these properties, these, oh, look at this height, look at this width, look at this backlinking, look at this canvas. Great. Well, if you can't write on it, it doesn't matter, because you can't do what you actually want to do with it in the first place. It's like, I can't remember the name of the device. I think it's like a planar pleximeter, something like that. And it measures directly. It measures an object directly. It can't measure the height of an object or the width of an object. It just can't do it because it measures area directly. And people, I would argue, directly perceive. So if you have a device that says, hey, here's the height, hey, here's the width, you go, well, that's not useful to me. I need to know what area it is so I can pick it up as a plate. If someone was to say, hey, this plate is 5 meters long and 4 centimeters wide, you have to then try and figure out, okay, this is what I want to put on the plate. What is the area of the plate? And you have to do so much work to figure out whether you can use it or not. which is what a lot of these PKM tools are. They're like, wait, how do I use this for that thing? Can I use this for this thing? No, just give them the freaking thing to write on. Which is why I explained the tools.
It reminds me a lot of someone I know was talking about. They're able to tell me the measurements of stuff really easily. And I'm just like, how is that even useful for me right now? Like, I just want to know whether it's not, why do I want to know that information? Why do I need that information? My focus is this. I don't need that.
And that is one of the I don't want to say complex, because it's not complex. I think that's one of the controversial or potentially radical takes inside the ecological approach, because it is looking at relational properties, not traditionally seen as geometric properties. We're looking at how the property relates to you. We're looking at how the thing actually relates directly with you, because we're directly perceiving the environment, not indirectly perceiving the environment. So when you're looking at a PKM tool, it's going, oh, that's how I use it. So when we're talking about Anytype, which is what the comments were relating to, Roland mentioned Anytype is much faster from their experience. Great. If it's faster for you in your experience, then great. However, with my experience, it wasn't faster with Obsidian. And this is where there's always going to be differences. We've got different devices, we've got different experiences, and we've got different goal-directed purposes. Like, if I'm going to be on my computer and not switching devices often, then when Anytype tries to sync something up, it's going to take a split second because it's syncing stuff.
Especially with how much you actually write as well.
Yeah.
And particularly for your use case, the amount you write, say, opening my Mac for the first time in like a couple of weeks. And syncing everything you've done in that time. Yeah, and
I guess that's kind of an insight, isn't it? With us being in the vault, you can actually see how much work I do, rather than me just saying, oh yeah, I write a lot. You're like, yeah, but how much is a lot? And then you're like, oh, okay.
That's a lot. That's a lot. Yeah, and it kind of goes like what I noticed from those comments is like your ideas don't match mine, so they're wrong. And it's very protective over the apps. It's like it's just a piece of technology. If it works for you, please carry on. But we're not talking about you, we're talking about our experiences. And that's all we can ever talk about. But you have, and I have been privy to it myself, like, you know, the evangelizing of apps, that they are the next best thing, they are the best possible option for you, and they are this, they are that, they're this, they're that, they're this, they're that.
Business in Notion.
Exactly. That domain no longer exists. I do not own that domain anymore because it didn't make sense. Because yes, you can put your business in Notion, but you don't necessarily have to. But you also don't necessarily not have to, which I think is the bit that is often missed in the space of like, this is the best app. You should use Obsidian. You should use Notion. You should use this. You should use that. But that, in this example, in this context, is never what we're saying, as was evident when we were speaking to Aidan. Of like, oh, I should do all these things. No, you shouldn't. No, you shouldn't listen to us. We are just two idiots who have a little bit of knowledge and know things, sharing our experiences from our experience. That's it. We are not anything more than two British idiots who you could interpret as childish.
You've just called me an idiot. You've just insulted me on the podcast. I feel insulted.
Oh, well, you'll live.
No, I won't. It's going to ruin my life. I'm going to change my worldview. And yeah, no, I don't give a shit. I had a bit of an epiphany just then. Obviously, I've been
If you what?
epiphany. Yeah. Yeah. So what
People who understood that reference, please let me know. That was a reference. Hopefully, someone at least someone.
No, I just yeah. So moving on from John's old references, because he's an old person.
Yes, because I'm an old person.
He's the OAP in the room.
Oh, great! I'm an OAP now.
Well, I work with my sister, and I'm 5 years older than her, so it's nice to be like, oh yeah, I'm the young one again. Because obviously, as time goes on, I have less experiences where I'm the young one. So I want to use the situation while I have it. So the epiphany that I had, so sort of, was you were talking about you, relating it to you, being personal to you, and we've discussed this a lot. An ecological approach obviously focuses on the individual relationship between the organism and environment. And where I had my little light bulb moment, obviously I was discussing properties beforehand. Relational properties are obviously the metric that we're using in the ecological approach. So when we say talk about context, talk about nuance, how does it relate to you? We're referring to relational properties.
Yeah.
Right? And when I look at things such as this is faster, this is open source, this is XYZ, they are geometric properties when referring to visual perception. But when we're looking at, I don't even know what type of perception this would be, because it's not a sense, it's not from a sense organ, it's our interpretation of the world. Traditional cognitivists would say, oh, that's your mental representation. No, it's not. What comes up with the mental representation? Your understanding of the world. So it's not this thing inside of your head coming up with it. It's you coming up with the affordances and the information you have in the world. So I would probably say it's a combined experience of sensed information, which is obviously perception. Anyway, so those features, those properties that we're calling out, are the objective properties that aren't useful unless they're put in relation to us, which I find really interesting, conceptualizing apps like that, which is why I was like, oh, light bulb moment, epiphany. Because at the end of the day, all the features that we talk about, if we don't find a use for them for ourselves, then it's useless, the relational properties that we're looking for. And so when I'm looking at faster, relationally to me, it was slower. Relationally to Roland, it was faster. I don't know what they were doing, but it was obviously
Perhaps it
different
was
for
the
me.
number of notes, perhaps. Less
Maybe,
notes.
but my Anytype, I mean, it was a bare bones Anytype. I didn't have much in there at all. And just simply writing, I think, because of the syncing it was doing, it was a split second slower. And I tried it for a week, so it wasn't a one-off experience. And I've been in Obsidian for a long time, and I mean it a lot. So I'm very familiar with how fast or how slow it can get, depending on what it is that you're doing with it. So unless you're packing a database, a data view page inside of Obsidian with like loads of commands running in the background, Obsidian for me was just faster.
Could be the visual element. I would assume that makes it load slower because it's got to serve it online often. So
That's
things
what I
like the
mean by the
banner plugin,
syncing
because
thing.
because I'm wondering whether I mean in Obsidian why it would be slower. Could be a bunch of plugins, could also be the plugins not loading fully, or problems with plugins, or it could be like loading loads of images or videos and stuff. That
Well,
might
that's
be
what I was
what it
referring to
is.
with like
Yeah.
the data view and all the junking up of the background. But still, I mean, even with all of the stuff in my vault, if I open up a file, it's lightning fast. It's as fast as Word. So, and Word is the gold standard, as it were, for word processors.
I've
It
never
is
heard
because it's
Word
used.
being fast.
Well, it's used by everyone, so it's the gold standard tool for the general population, which is the relative metric I'm using. And when it comes to the open source point, I kind of find it mute, like, because Anytype isn't actually open source. They've open sourced some of it, but not all of it. So that's the same as Obsidian, because all Obsidian plugins are open source. And then a lot of Obsidian is also open source from other projects, but the main bulk isn't. Logseek is the closest thing you're going to get to an open source software. But my argument, unless you're tech savvy enough to understand and actually use the open source software, it doesn't mean anything. It's one of those properties you're like, hey, that's cool. Great. Like, so what?
Yeah. At the end of the day, does it help me achieve what I want to achieve, whether it's open or closed source? As long as I can use it, I care less. I like the idea of open source. I think open source is fantastic, but at the same time,
Yeah, but
when
is
it
it?
comes to my well, I mean, it's nice to have things for free, I suppose. Like,
Free and open source are different.
yeah, I know. I don't know. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just I just don't care.
No, exactly. And this is where I think it comes down relational to objective properties. I'm going to leverage this because this is what obviously we were discussing previously. And it's trying to bring some conceptual understanding to the ecological approach because, boy, it's complicated. But when I'm looking at these properties, open source relates to me in literally no way because I can't use it. The usability is not there. So the relational element of the property is redundant for me. For someone else in different experience, the relational property would be there. They can perceive affordances because of with the information in the environment because of their prior expertise. I don't see that. And I don't think many people will see that. So it just becomes this property in the environment, this information in the environment that we can't use. And I think that's true for most people. And this is where I think the backwards and forwards of app comparisons is somewhat pointless when they talk about features and features alone, because there's no usability to them. And usability is the term that people want to use when they're discussing these tools. But the language that they try and use, oh, this feature is good, this feature is good, this feature is good, and I use it like this. So those features that you don't use, why do you talk about them? Would be my question. Are you choosing not to use them, maybe? Which moves on to the second comment from Frank Boyer, I think.
Yes.
And I understand where they're coming from. However, I don't get the point of the comment apart from saying I disagree. Okay, great, you disagree. Where's your point? Where's your argument? Where's your claims? What are you actually saying? Because in the comment, great, love the comment, but add some more to it. So you said our criticisms, or I'm speaking as if they're listening. Maybe they are listening. And they said that the criticisms were childish and don't make sense, but then didn't elaborate, didn't say why they were childish, what made them childish, and didn't explain why they didn't make sense. They didn't make sense to you. Fine. Why? What was it that didn't make sense? Was your experience different from ours? If it was, how so? Then when it comes to putting Obsidian on a pedestal, who's putting Obsidian on a pedestal? Is that us? If it is, then that's because we use the tool. So it's not being put on a pedestal, it's being used as a comparative metric because we're using it. It's relational to us. We can't say, oh, Anytype is better than capacities, because we don't use capacities, and we can't make that comparison with expertise anyway. We could, it's just we'd probably bring up a lot of flaws. There would be a lot of information that isn't true, so we wouldn't want to do that. So the comment, even though it's useful in starting a conversation, the conversation ends extremely quickly because of the lack of nuance and the lack of information that's being shared in the comment, which I think happens across social media, which is what I would try and push for inside of a conversation. How do you further that conversation rather than starting it? And that's where I think X or Twitter struggles, because people are not familiar with how to communicate in an effective way to continue a conversation. I could interpret the comment as an insult. Oh, you're childish, criticisms don't make sense, and you're just putting Obsidian on a pedestal. That could be an insult to my explanation. I don't perceive it like that. I don't interpret it like that. I actually interpret it as a... How do I put this plainly? I interpret it in a way that the person leaving the comment doesn't have a deep level of understanding of how to explain their argument well enough in the environment that they made the comment. I'm trying to be very specific here. Simply put, I don't think they explain their point well. But I don't think it's because they don't understand what it is that they're saying. I think they didn't want to or don't understand how to communicate their point well enough for me to then continue the conversation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I'm like, I recognize if the person's listening, they can interpret what I'm going to say in a very negative way. So I was trying to change the way that I explained the point in a way that lessened the blow, potentially. Trying to add nuance there. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on the comment as well?
Nothing that you haven't already covered, to be fair. I would be really interested to understand. I said one of the things that was said was that my case isn't universal. Like, I think that related to your case isn't universal.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. That is stated nearly every single time. Of like, yeah, it's a very nuanced case, which I think is where, because most apps can do most things fine. You can get away with most things in most apps. Where things become different and where you get that is when there are niche cases. And often there are so many more niche cases that are never considered on social media, on content, because no one wants the niche. That there is not a demand for that. Very few people actually. Well, it's easier to make money. It's easier to make money with generalized information. That's the best way to put it. I think it's a much better way.
Yeah, I
so
agree
you
with
reach a large audience, so you get a lot of money and a lot of people watch and a lot of this and a lot of that. Whereas this channel is pretty much the exact opposite.
Yep.
We're not after the generalized stuff, because you can find that on every other channel. This is about a super nuanced conversation where we go deep and we go very hard, because we're focused on like the little things, because in the day-to-day, like, lived experience, it's the little tiny details, the nitpicky BS that we go on about that actually matters.
Because the relationship between you and your environment changes with every piece of information there, because there is no duplicate experience. Everything is unique if we directly perceive. If we indirectly perceive, then you can have duplicate experiences because of your mental representation, but that's not what we believe. Which is, again, the ecological approach, because we directly perceive everything is unique. And if everything is unique, then the information inside of the environments needs to be explored for affordances and constraints with varying levels of expertise. And the expertise is gained through different experiences, i.e., John has a different experience to me, and I have a different experience to him. So we have different levels of expertise. So when we explore these points, there are different views. When Aidan came on, he had a different level of expertise. So we got a different view on the same information. We're in the same environment, but because of our differing levels of expertise, the relational properties are different, the affordances we perceive are different. Therefore, discussing that exposes new ideas to each individual. And that's where people can learn from just having a conversation, which is seen inside of the literature, but being able to explain why through an ecological approach is different from being able to explain why in a traditionally cognitive psychology approach.
Yeah.
And explaining that, I think, is going to be my my thing. My thing. You know, creators have their thing. I feel like that's going to be my thing for the next few years, is just explaining the ecological approach, like explaining the world and experiences through the ecological approach, because it's not something you can grasp quickly.
No.
Yeah. The Discord event recently, I was going ham. I was why going ham is a saying, I really don't know. Like, why ham? Why not cheese or beef or pork? I know it doesn't sound right, but I'm going cheese just sounds stupid. I'm going ham makes sense. Like, what? Why? Anyway. Sorry.
I know. I was like, yeah, that's a good point. I'm going cheese now. Scram.
Yeah. I was going cheese on this explanation, and we were going. I say we. I was going into the depths of the ecological approach when explaining this learning situation inside of schools, inside of the open Discord event that happened on Friday. There's a recording in the Discord if you want to have a look. It's towards the end. But what I realized is the person I was talking to, they were in the chat and I was talking. They didn't understand the ecological approach as I was discussing it to start with. They asked a question. I then explained what I meant using the question. Then they asked another question, and I found myself explaining the same thing, but responding, like saying the same thing I had said before, but responding to the question. Obviously, that is direct learning. That is the ecological approach in learning, because knowledge of, knowledge about, they are different. So the coaching element of the ecological approach is how you coach the ecological approach. You can't lecture about it, but the lecturing triggers the conversation to start with, which obviously enforces that you need to explain something multiple times, which we already know, for people to understand it, but they need to engage in the information, which again, we already know, and asking those questions. So how do we then use, sort of pivoting a little bit to BASB, how do we then use the lectures, the asymmetrical information that's shared online, if we need to learn through practice? That is the issue for me with BASB.
Yeah.
Lots of people have knowledge about. They can regurgitate the information of BASB. They can say, well, I was going to say they can say concept maps, but that's not BASB. They can say para. They can say, oh, organize it. They can say areas. They can say projects. They can say progressive summarization. But that doesn't mean anything unless they have practice in it. And like I said at the beginning of the episode, at the end of the day, it's writing. How many people actually practice writing that have a second brain? That would be an interesting question to find a potentially measurable, objective answer to.
Yeah, I think building a second brain. I did it when it was a live cohort. I think it's now a course and a live cohort.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember.
It's a membership, so they've got pre-recorded lessons.
Now. Okay, cool. I don't have the membership.
You should do. You should have default access to the membership stuff, just
I
not the new live stuff that comes out, like the Q&As and bits and bobs.
Oh, cool.
It's repeated information, so I don't find it useful.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting from a business perspective, because I've been thinking about it a lot around courses and, you know, static. Here's a video, watch it, go learn. It's like, go learn. Go learn. What was that? How do we ask the questions? How do we have that space and almost foster that space to actually ask questions?
I would argue that it's not a case of asking questions, it's a case of doing something, because action and perception are coupled. So in order to learn, we need to do something, learning experiences. How and why you do the thing is the practice design and the philosophy of practice you're using. So as an educator, how do we create environments through practice design, following our philosophy of practice, to encourage those individuals in the learning experiences to develop something? And for me, that's where you say, okay, go do something. Constraints-led approach. Go do something with these constraints and see what you learn. See what happens. Come to me if you have a question. Come to me if you don't know what's going on. Or don't come to me and figure it out on your own and tell me the answer afterwards. That is coaching. That, in my eyes, is effective education. And that is what I would want schools to do. That is what I would want educators to do. Not say, here's the lecture, here's the video, here's the content, now learn from it. Is that useful? Yes. But it's useful when they have a project that the information becomes useful in. And that's what my course is. My course is, hey, here's some videos that might be useful if you're doing work like this. So if someone's building out an Obsidian vault and they're like, I don't know where to go here or how to start this or what to go from here, they could watch one of my course videos and go, oh, that's how they did that. I don't like that bit, but I could use this to go there. So I'm exposing information inside their learning experience of building something that they could then use, rather than giving them an answer to a question they haven't asked.
Yeah, I think you did a vault video recently. I can't remember what one it was, but you actually added something in there that was like, oh, that's really cool. I like that. Where you actually went, and this is how you could change it. And this is how you could do this. I think it was the student one.
Oh, the back to school.
The back to school one. I liked that style. Because it was very much, okay, this is a thing, this is a constraint, this is what I'm building. Here's how you could change it. Here are questions you could ask, kind of thing. And I was like, I like that, because I'm poking back into Notion again, because I'm kind of intrigued at what they've got, and
the Formula's 2.0.
Yeah, the Formula's 2.0 is kind of cool. I was like, oh, that's cool. That removes some of those friction points of always having to have relations and always having to have roll-ups and always having to have this and that and this and that and this and that. I'm like, yeah, I like that. That's cool. Let me go play. Because then I could rebuild some of my older stuff to be what I actually wanted it to be when I built the original.
So I'm going to call you out a little bit here.
Go for it.
I've put a video up in the course about me using Notion. And in the open event, I said that there's the next video I'm going to do is me revisiting Notion.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
No.
You're the admin of the Discord. You didn't know. Oh.
No, of course I bloody didn't. For once, I didn't know that. Wow, that's weird, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's a very light call out, but yeah, no, and this is why I find it interesting to discuss BASB and all this sort of stuff, because if you're not actively engaged in it, you don't really keep up with stuff because there's no need to. You have something that works, so you don't need to keep up with my stuff. And you have a process that works. You act in the world, and that's where, because my course isn't a step-by-step instruction course, it's a hey, figure it out when you go along. I would imagine, I don't know whether this would be true or not, and maybe self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit here, but if you're going into Notion, you're like, I'm not sure how to use this. You could go into my course information and see, oh, he's using Notion. How's he using Notion? And that's when it becomes useful. Not, oh, he's using Notion. Great. I'll now copy that. That's not what it is. And that's the difference between the course that I'm trying to, I say the course, it's not really a course. It's like a university course. It's like, here's a library of lessons and go use the ones that are applicable to you at the point in time. I am looking at building out more of a course-ish-esque type thing to accompany that, but that's another conversation, which we can talk about if you want. But that's the point of the resources. The resources are to help you when you act in the world. And the BASB in general is not that.
No, it's a lot of philosophy and a lot of theory. And one of the things that I really struggled with was the practical application of it. It wasn't until I fumbled through Para that I was like, oh, this is the specific context of why I care about it and why I use it. And I was Para for a long time, and I still am. I still use Para daily. I am always using Para, but not in the same context as it's taught. It is a filing system, I suppose, theoretical system for filing stuff, and that's literally it.
It's a framework.
It's a framework that I'm using for filing, and that's literally all it is. And I'm not sticking to it strictly. And I think a lot of when it comes to building my own courses and my own workshops and my own programs and all the stuff that I'm doing in the background, I want to make it very clear that actually this is not a you should do this. It's more of a you could do this. Here is a idea that you can play with and put wherever the heck you like. Because often the focus is on app this, do that. When for me, I am less interested in that type of constraint.
Something that I find mildly interesting as well is BASB. Obviously, Tiago talks about progressive summarization. And progressive summarization is highlighting. But highlighting is bad for learning. It's ineffective, according to Ali Donlosky's study and everyone else that references Ali because they can't figure it out on their own. They don't bother looking at the research. They just say, oh, highlighting is ineffective for studying. One, what is studying? Two, what do you mean by highlighting? Are you saying just put a color on something and forget about it? Well, of course it's going to be useless because you're not doing anything with it. If you're highlighting something and doing something with it, well, now it's useful. But yeah, they just make blanket statements because other people have made them and they don't consider the consequences of making the blanket statements. Whether that is, I would argue that's incompetence. I don't see incompetence as a bad word. I just see it as you are incompetent at the moment. You have a lower level of skill in that, lower level of expertise in that skill at the moment, which is fine. Everyone will be there. But in order to move forwards, which is what people are trying to do, they argue that they are evidence-based and they have done the research. No, watching a video and then regurgitating what they've said is not that. That is just doing an internet search, which is different from my interpretation, my meaning behind research. You've not actually looked at any primary sources yourself. You've not looked at conflicting views or nuanced arguments. No. And so rolling back a bit, when it comes to the highlighting thing, progressive summarization has 4 steps, I think.
Something like that.
yeah, it's like step 1 is just to copy down your own words. Step 2 is highlight something that's interesting. Step 3, highlight the highlights of really interesting stuff. And step 4 is to use it, I think, something like that. I don't know. I don't pay attention to the step-by-steps because I don't follow them. But when you look at it and step back and go, oh, you need multiple touch points with information, you go, okay, that's obvious. You want to focus on the information that's useful to you. Again, that's obvious. I don't see that as something new or novel. When I look at my parents and the information they're looking at, what are they doing when they're looking at a document? They look at the document and go, that's important. I need to pay attention to that. So they do. And then when they come back to it, they pay attention to the bit that they remember that was important to them. They didn't have to highlight. They didn't have to extract a copy. They didn't have to do any of the stuff that was in the step-by-step of progressive summarization. They just looked at a thing and went, that's important. I need to remember that. And if it's so important, they need to do something about it. They write it on a piece of paper or they put it on the whiteboard that's on the kitchen door. That's progressive summarization, but they don't know it's progressive summarization. They're not using any of the steps. They are naturally using their attention and focusing on the thing there. Which to me baffles me as to why some people need to be told this stuff, or they perceive themselves needing to be told this stuff to do it.
Yeah.
I think it's a better way to phrase that. Oh, yeah. Revolutionizing my studying because progressive. No, not at all. You were already doing it.
And I think that's so much of it is like, there is also the marketing element of it. It's like, this is
business is brilliant. It's brilliant for business.
Oh yeah,
you got a label on the thing. You can market it. I was reading some other PKM creators that I won't mention the names of, but they were talking about their recent marketing of webinars and marketing of products and how it's so draining. I'm like, don't do it then. But they're talking about marketing their products. Why are you marketing a product if it's natural? If people are already doing it? Because you want to sell something. There's nothing wrong with wanting to sell something.
No.
But make it obvious. Hey, I want to sell you this thing so that I can get money to try and help you do something, rather than I want to help you do something, pay me if you think I'm being helpful. And they are two drastically different approaches to education. I take the latter. So as a business person, I suck. And I understand that. But I am a coach. I am not a salesperson. I don't want to be a salesperson. I don't want to be a marketer in the traditional terms. I want to be a coach. I want to be an educator. And they are drastically different. And this actually comes back to a conversation I had in the Discord recently. Someone said, why do you help so much in the Discord? They said, what do you get out of it? And I'm like, I don't. I help. Yeah, but why are you doing it? Because I want to help. Yeah, but other people don't do this. I know, because I want to help. Like, I'm a coach, I'm a teacher in quote marks. I go all the way back to the very first point in my year. I did a Patreon event on Discord recently about telling my story, and one of the first points that I remember my head teacher saying, my head of course saying, a coach makes themselves redundant. Yes. I am a coach. I want to make myself redundant. I actually like the fact my Discord is pretty empty with conversation, because it means those in there don't have questions, or they don't perceive the openness of the environment to not have questions. But I can't know that. There is no way for me to know that. All I can do is respond and act in the environment there. So I'm coaching. I'm educating. I'm not marketing. I'm not selling. And that is the difference between the BASB, the LYT, the PPV, the LINSA, all the other acronyms and letters and rubbish stuff.
JKLMNOP.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. Yes, I'm not earning lots of money, but I don't want to. I'm a coach. Anyway, now that I'm off my little ranty pedestal, do you want to get back to what it is that you were saying?
I can't remember what I said, to be honest. What was I saying?
Well, at least that means that you found my my point meaningful because you focused on my point rather than your point.
Yeah.
And that to me is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because if you're like, oh, right, now, blah, 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 it means that you weren't really paying attention to me, which isn't a bad thing. I don't think not paying attention is a bad thing. When teachers say you weren't paying attention, students typically in school think, oh, that's a bad thing. I need to pay attention because the teachers told me to pay attention. No, if you're not paying attention, that's not a bad thing. If you're not paying attention, it means you perceive your attention to be more applicable or appropriate elsewhere. Whose problem is that? The teacher, because the practice design and the environment is not good enough for that person. The relationship with them and the environment is not good enough. How does the teacher learn to do that? I would say teacher development, and it's an ongoing conversation in the Discord.
Oh, that's a good topic.
Teachers are overworked. Yes. Why are they overworked? Because they're told to do stuff that's redundant by businesses. Okay, so let's reduce the redundancies that teachers are being told to do so they can develop skills to become better educators. But this then comes back to the business conversation we've just had. It's a big circle that society needs to wake up in. But money makes the world go round, and education isn't money focused. Good, effective education is not financially stable. Because one-to-one people, one-to-one coaches is not great.
Yeah.
So when it comes to BASB, I'm going to ask you, John, would you recommend someone to go and do the BASB course or to look into the BASB philosophy? Would you recommend it? Ooh, he's thinking.
It depends.
Okay.
I think it does. I was going to continue. If you want to be exposed to something new, I suppose. I mean, it's not even new anymore.
You could expand, and then you just argued with yourself.
Well, yeah, that's the whole point of this podcast.
So you say it depends.
Yeah.
Who would you recommend it to? Taking longer than I thought.
I would recommend it to people who don't have confidence in what they do, or that they are not attuned to what they already do.
What does that look like? What does that look like?
They don't feel they're writing enough. They don't feel they're doing enough. They don't feel like they're taking enough action, and they don't really know why. And they're looking for more information. And they think that information will solve it.
And you think the BASB content, not necessarily the course, but the content will get people doing more writing or more of what they want to do?
Well, that really depends on them. For me, it got me thinking. It started, if you are right at the beginning of personal knowledge management and you haven't got a clue and you need some way to start and you want something to help, something to follow, a constraint to have, then yes, you could get that. Or
there's a but or an or coming.
Yeah, it's like, but you also don't need it. It's not necessary. It is a helpful, I suppose. I kind of going back to that like very thin thing that you're standing on, and it can slightly expand you, not very much, mind. But if you do take it, go into it with the philosophy of doing stuff, because that's not necessarily kind of promoted. It's like, here's a philosophy, have fun. And I think that is the if you enter it into like, okay, cool, this is what I've done, right? Don't take it as gospel, take it as an idea, that you can question and say, why is this good? Why is this bad? Why is this good? Why is this bad? Why don't I like this? Why do I like that? That's what I did when I took it. It was, okay, that's interesting, but that doesn't work for me. So Para was a really good example. Projects, areas, resources, and archive. I like one of the things that I took from that was really good was the archive. Archive does not mean delete. I liked that because I would never archive things. So it's like, but I might need it, but I might need it, but I might need it. Because I don't know what I don't know. And deleting is kind of permanent. And so having that archive folder where I could just archive stuff, and then if I want it, a year, 6 months, I know it's there. And I see the archive folder whenever I open it. So it's that little bit of a, hey, do you need something from here? And I know where to go whenever I want to find something. Do you need BASB to do that? No, of course not. But is it a constrained thing to play in? Yes.
Interesting. So I have a little bit of a different opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yay!
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend BASB to anyone.
No. So what would you recommend instead then?
I would recommend people do what it is that they want to do.
How do they know that though?
Well, they know what they want to do, otherwise they wouldn't go looking for it. If someone says, I want to start writing more, they know they want to start writing more. If they then go and look at BASB, they then have lots of information for them to organize, which actually increases the complexity of the task of writing.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So if they wanted to start writing, the best thing for them to do, start writing. When they then come up with a problem, how do I script? How do I research? How do I publish? Now BASB is useless because BASB doesn't tell you how to script. It tells you philosophies of how to organize information, so you don't need that. And BASB doesn't tell you how to publish stuff because it's not about publishing. That's rite of passage, if anything.
Yeah.
But rite of passage is a whole other course and a whole other conversation. And when it comes to publishing, where are you publishing? What are you publishing? Who are you publishing for? And again, all of those pieces of information are not in one course. They're not in one area of content.
No.
So I don't see the courses and the contents as good places to start for anyone actually looking for it. Do I see them as useful? Yes. But the pieces of content needs to be put in context with the learning experience the person is going through. If the learning experience someone is going through requires some way to organize information in a way that helps them more for what they're currently doing, then yeah, maybe it could help. But if not, then no. It just adds more complexity to the already complex learning environment, which is going to, if anything, stop them from writing. And that's what I see most people in the PChem space doing. Shiny new toy syndrome is a perfect example of that. There's a new app that's going to solve the problem that I didn't have. Here's a new philosophy. Here's a new idea to solve a problem that I didn't have. 3 years down the line, I've been PKM for 3 years. How much have you written? Nothing. Well, actually, no, I've got like 200 different essay ideas and I've got 1,000 ideas in this database, or used all of these tags over there, and I've got this dashboard that does this, and I've got this map of content that says that, and I've got this folder system that, yeah, but what have you actually done with this stuff? Like, what have you actually done? Like, what practice have you actually been engaged in? Oh, well, I have 5,000 atomic notes. Great. So what? How has that impacted your behavior? How has that impacted the skills that you've developed? Have you developed skills through that? If you have, is that the atomic note that developed the skill? Or is that you watching a video and going, oh, I should probably sleep more. I'm going to sleep more. Do you have an atomic note that reminds you about sleeping more, or do you just do it? If you just do it, then the PKM atomic note, whatever structure thing you have, that's not doing the work. That's not practice. That's you writing words on a screen because you think you should. But
Yeah.
that's an alternative view, potentially controversial view.
I think often there is I don't know where to start. And so the assumption is,
That really annoys me.
I know, but it is the response of like, I don't know where to begin. Where do I even start?
That comes back to traditional views in
Yeah.
cognitive psychology requiring step-by-steps, because the central executive needs to start somewhere, and that comes back to the tabula rasa. For those unfamiliar, the tabula rasa is we start with no knowledge. We are born with no knowledge. And when we go into a new environment, I don't know where to start. We start with no knowledge. BS. You have loads of knowledge. You have loads of experience. You know where to start. What you don't know is the first step instruction that you're expecting to be given.
Mm.
That is different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And yeah.
I guess expanding on that a little bit, I don't know where to start. You do know where to start, but you don't know if your way of where to start is the best, correct, right way.
Yeah.
But there isn't one. There is the way that you go with. You can't start and then go, that was a bad start, I'm going to go backwards in time and start again. No, you can't go backwards in time. And if you sit there trying to debate which way is the best to start, well, you won't know which way is the best to start because you perceive and act together. So you will start something thinking it's the best way to start and realize, actually, no, this is too complicated because I don't have this expertise or that expertise, or this information isn't what I was looking for. Which means you just need to start the thing.
This goes back to something that I've experienced.
Mhm.
My experience. So I think I've said this before. I don't see myself as an artistic person, a creative person in the artist. I love that. I roll. That is the perception and the constraint I put upon myself of like, I'm not artistic. I can't do art things. I don't know this because of this. I can't measure a straight line because I can only see out of one eye, so I can't get the depth perception correct. And my assumption was that actually mattered. So I've been building dungeon tiles, which are really, it's super simple. It's basically pieces of paper stuck on foam core, which is bits of foam. And I wanted to have perfectly straight lines because I felt that was important. Except the important thing is to make the down tiles and to fumble through it. So I spent so long trying to think of the best way of doing it to try and make my lines as straight as possible, until one point I was just like, I just need to make some tiles now. And so I just started to do the tiles, and I have a nice, lovely pile of it. And it was very much like, oh, well, this is nowhere near as hard as I made it seem. And that action changed my perception. And that loop of just like, cool, there we go. There's the thing I already know. Coming back to go, hi, just do the darn thing.
Mm-hmm. That is, to me, where the learned helplessness, for lack of a better term, from prior experience comes into the decisions that we're making. I luckily developed skills early on in university due to the experiences that I had that moved me away from a lot of the learned helplessness because of the constraints put on me by the philosophy that I was taught through.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are very similar. The way that they explain terms, use words to express their experiences, add verbal constraints to their behaviors because they don't know enough potentially about the ecological approach, or something related to the ecological approach in a way where they can explain something in a different way, which is what helped me. It's what gave me the freedom to go, actually, no, we are different. And I see this all over the neurodiverse space. I'm going to call it that because that's what they call themselves. So I'm respecting the label that they use. They talk about nuance. They talk about nuance. They talk
Okay,
about
pause. I'm intrigued by this. I want to come back to that. You do not like that label.
No.
And this is a shift you've made, because you've never really used that label without some form of reaction. You had a reaction, but it was not like a big one like normally. So what's changed? Because you're like, that's the label they want to use. Okay.
I'm using the label the way they want me to use it because I'm respecting them. Do I disagree? Yes. Do I see my disagreement meaning anything in this conversation? No. So there's no reason for me to exhibit behaviors that show my disdain for the label.
That intrigued me.
Yeah, it's a good poke. So when it comes to the neurodiverse group, they talk about a lot of the stuff we're referring to, but they're still using terminology and language that they end up stumbling over and end up contradicting themselves with their logic because it doesn't make sense. A perfect example, I saw a tweet from, I think it was Jesse, I don't remember, but they said, my brain isn't letting me work today, so I'm not going to. Something like that. And I was sitting there thinking, okay, to start with, it's not your brain, it's you. And when you say it doesn't want to work today, you mean you don't want to do something that you have an idea about how it should be done, rather than changing the way you could do it. And you've said today, encompassing what, the whole 12 hours you're awake. So you've made drastic, I would call it drastic assumptions in that, where you've explained an experience that a lot of people can relate to and go, oh yeah, that's me. I can't be asked to do anything today either. No. You don't want to do that piece of work at that point in time for those related events for a variety of potential reasons, because there is multi-causal nonlinear causality inside of the world. You sharing that on Twitter, X, fine. How do you actually get the thing done? By changing the relationship between you and the environment. And lo and behold, like 7 hours later, Jesse tweeted, I managed to get the thing done. So what a waste of a tweet. Like, I don't see the benefit in that. I don't see the positive logic in that. And I actually see that as potentially harmful, because you're reinforcing these ideas that your brain stopped you from working, which it didn't. And all of the other things I've just said were not true. They weren't accurate in explaining your experience. But other people will see that and go, oh, my brain doesn't want me to do that thing, so I'm not going to do it. Rather than trying to find a solution to getting the thing done. Jesse is productive. He is a productive person. He does have skills. He has expertise. He's developed that over time.
Yeah.
Whether he's aware of that.
No one talks about that bit.
Well, no, exactly. Whether he's aware of that or not, I think he is. He does that. So the audience he's talking to should be aware of the skill that he has that they, I would imagine, don't have. But he's not talking about the skills he's developed. He emphasizes the struggle he has rather than the skill that he's developed when he explains his experience. He explains his experience through, I have a problem, rather than, this is the experience I have and this is how I'm going to do something about it. Which is my irritation with a lot of the neurodiverse space.
Yes. Yeah. As I've been watching the neurodiverse space more and more, it is learned helplessness. It is.
And not by fault of their own.
No, absolutely not. No. But it's like, okay, cool. Yes, there are struggles. Yes, it sucks. So what are we going to do about it? Like, what are we going to do? And there is space for just going, okay, I feel awful right now, and being with that, because that is important. I've had some horrific time. I've had a really rough time, and it's been shit. But something happened this morning where I went, okay, cool. What am I not seeing to get out of this? To move forward, to get out of this is not quite the right word I want. But like, what am I? What in the environment can I not see? There is something here
that you haven't attuned to. Yeah.
I haven't attuned to. Yeah. What in the environment have I not perceived? What am I not attuned to? Because I'm stuck here. I don't want to be here. I want to be here. What do I need? Versus, I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm broken.
Mm.
Instead, it's okay, cool. What can I do? Okay, this is how I'm feeling. Yes, this sucks. Lots is going wrong. I'm feeling feelings. I felt those feelings. And there
Feeling
are no
feelings. I should hope you are.
good.
You're alive. You exist.
Do I? Oh, that's strange.
I mean, we can't prove that, but yeah.
No, true. Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's
Descartes.
very much like, okay, cool. What am I going to do? What do I want to do? What action am I going to take? What do I do now? Do I continue feeling feelings? Okay, I can do. Yes. That's fine. And I may do. But it won't be forever. It won't be permanent. It's like, okay, cool. This is where I am. This is where I want to be. What do I want? Do I want to feel feelings for a bit longer? And feeling the feelings is not wrong. And not feeling the feelings is not wrong. And doing something is not wrong. And not doing something is not wrong. It's very much a, what do I want to do? Me, not my brain, not this, not some esoteric thing. What do I want?
Your mind and your spirit is telling you something.
Oh, God. What do I want? Because that, at the end of the day, is what will get me to do something different. Or the same thing.
Mm. I would say when it comes to feelings, feelings are an expression of your experience, right? So when it comes to feeling feelings, you can't not if you exist.
Yeah.
So my first question would be, okay, if you're going to attune to your feelings, what does that look like? Does that mean adding a label to the feelings you have right now? I'm angry, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm depressed. Does adding a written or expressed label to the feeling help?
No.
For me, no, it never did.
No, it hasn't helped.
Because the word is never all-encompassing. So adding that word doesn't help. Adding that label didn't help for me. So what does help when trying to attune myself to an experience of feeling something? Doing it. What does that mean? How can you do a feeling? Well, if I feel sad, I'm behaving in a way that makes me feel sad because they are combined. Action and perception are coupled. So in order to feel something else, you need to recognize that your behaviors are making you feel sad, so you want to do something else. So you're not saying, oh, I feel sad. You're saying, okay, this doesn't feel the way I want it to feel. Let's do something else. And when you check yourself, when you go, I feel mentally drained. No. You have an experience that you don't like, so go do something else.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, you don't have to articulate why you don't like it. I think the need to articulate why you don't like something or what it is that you don't like about something is put on a pedestal. No, I think it's spoken about too much. Can it help to articulate it? Yes. Of course it will. But you don't have to do it all the time. I don't sit here and go, okay, I'm feeling like I don't want to do this anymore. I think that's because of all of these emotions, because of all of these potential causes that I can't actually prove, and because of all of these other things that I have researched and understand that may be contributing to. No, I get up and walk out. I'm not reflecting in action at that point. I'm going, I don't want to do this anymore, and I go leave. And I go for a walk. I listen to a book. I do something else. And then I come back and do something else. And then I come back and do something else. I continue my experience of existing. That's me. Obviously, everyone has different levels of skills. So some of that won't be applicable to some because they don't have that, they don't have the expertise and those skills to be able to do that yet. How do you develop those? Practice. How do you practice? Find a design. How do you find a design? Use a philosophy of practice that you hold to build up a design. How do you start with that? Practice.
Just do it.
Nike. Pick, just do it. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add?
No.
Right. Well, thanks everyone for listening.
Yep.
If you have any questions, put them in the comment section below. And as we mentioned earlier, try and be explicit with the comments as best as possible so we can contribute to the conversation. So, bye.
Bye.